Once again this year, the Boston Landmarks Orchestra will offer a series of free concerts at locations around the city, including the Charles River Esplanade. To tell us about this year's lineup, stretching from green space to outer space, is the orchestra's music director and conductor, Christopher Wilkins. Thank you very much for being with us, Christopher.
Pleasure to be with you.
First of all, one thing that's really new in this year's schedule, because I know you try to diversify the music for people around the city with your concerts, but you're going to have a discussion this year, and this is going to focus on a famous Broadway musical, Showboat.
Right. We're looking at Showboat and contextualizing it in many different ways, both what led to Showboat and why it was groundbreaking in 1927 and what's come out of Showboat, both pro and con, because Showboat has lived on for 92 years. It's the most revived musical in New York, 9 revivals on Broadway. It has a glorious history and, of course, a magnificent score. At the same time, it's been very controversial for its portrayal of race. And Showboat's very much about race, so it was very progressive, a very forward-looking musical in that way. And yet, how the work is cast, how you handle the dialect, how you handle some of the difficult language in the show, all these things have changed over the years as society's understandings of what's acceptable and what isn't have changed. And we're looking at all of that, and we have invited in a really distinguished panel to look at the question of race on stage, particularly through the lens of Showboat. Emmett Price, who's a prominent scholar and musician here in Boston, will moderate. And we have a gentleman who's written 2 books on Showboat, including one called Who Should Sing Old Man River? Todd Decker. He will be here. And the man who's going to sing Old Man River, Alfie Powell, who has sung Old Man River in the White House for the last 7 presidents in a row, will serve on that panel. And someone else you and I just mentioned before we came on air here, Ashley Gordon, who leads a wonderful organization called Castle of Our Skins, devoted to music and performers of African American heritage, will be on that panel. Also, David Hodgkins will weigh in. He is the music director of Coro Allegro, the gay and lesbian chorus here in Boston, and they've been quite involved in questions of race on the concert stage as well.
Well, what's also going on in your concert schedule here is about letting the music speak for itself and how music, different pieces of music speak to each other. Talk about the context for playing some of the Showboat music in one of your concerts coming up.
And that's a beautiful lead-in, thank you. I think a lot of times the programming itself does say all you need to say, and that the way you arrange a program says a lot about how the pieces speak to each other. So we're doing a lot of spirituals. Old Man River was a pseudo-spiritual. It was written for Paul Robeson to sing. He ended up turning down the offer for the premiere production, but then became associated with the song for the rest of his career. And it was written, modeled on Deep River. It has the same low note and the same high note, and that was a song that in Harry T. Burley's arrangement, Robeson made famous. So the spirituals are very much a part of the fabric of Showboat, and certainly of the way that the narrative of the influence of African American music on American popular music is told even to this day. And then we look also at work that's been written since 1927, William Grant Still's Festive Overture. We have a wonderful setting by Nathaniel Dett, actually that's around the time of Showboat. And a contemporary work by a St. Louis-based composer called Fred Onivwera-Swoke, where he's really confronting directly the question of how race is portrayed on stage. So it's quite a range of pieces that are creating this context for Showboat.
I have to confess, I was pretty old when I discovered the music of William Grant Still. I guess, is it just me, or are these composers really neglected, you think?
Neglected. I mean, I look at that Festive Overture and I think if we understood that it had been composed by Aaron Copland, it would be played all the time. It's brilliantly orchestrated, it's fun, it's melodious, the orchestrations, the harmonies are somewhat jazz-like, and he was a towering talent. He in a way could straddle, both the classical side and the jazz side, and then compose for film and for shows. it's extraordinary music, and I think it's only in recent years that we have started to discover some of these names. Another one that's programmed on our series is Florence Price, and she's really getting her day in the sun now. And she was in a way of the same type of composer, where she took basically the palette of the Western tradition, but then explored the African-based heritage in America, particularly jazz and folk song, and infused her music with that.
And another composer, looking further down in your schedule here, who drew on grassroots traditions. Actually, I should say two, because you have one concert, it's a green concert. You got works by Dvorak and Vaughan Williams. I guess that goes for both of them. They were into their grassroots music in their different countries.
Absolutely. Very much interested in folk music, very much influenced by nature. In a way, all Dvorak's music is like that. And here's a case where Vaughan Williams is taking that intuition and writing about a land he'd never visited, Antarctica. And the Symphonia Antarctica began its life as a film score for the film Scott of the Antarctic, about the fateful effort to get to be the first humans to the South Pole. And this is in collaboration with the New England Aquarium. We're doing a night really devoted to climate change. And so we're showing a film put together by Natural History New Zealand, set to all of the Symphonia Antarctica of Vaughan Williams, and then also showing an astonishing photographic sequence made by David Arnold, former writer for the Boston Globe, who's taken, on the one hand, photographs taken by Brad Washburn, founder of the Museum of Science, of glaciers in the 1930s and 40s, aerials. David showed me a photograph and he said, the entire state of Connecticut could fit in this one photograph. And then David has gone up in planes and shot that exact same photograph today. And the loss is apparent and devastating. And then he's done the same for coral reefs and set all of it to the Barber Adagio for strings, which just tears your heart out. It's so beautiful.
That symphony by Vaughan Williams is not his most famous or even most respected, but a lot of people haven't heard it. But I guess if you've heard the planets, and you've done the planets,
we did
some
last
of those
year.
outer planets, this sounds like this kind of music.
It absolutely does, and I think that may have been an influence on him. And we're opening with our moon landing celebration, 50th anniversary of the moon landing, and in there we have some of Also sprach Zarathustra, which Stanley Kubrick used in 2001, so another film-based score. And Kubrick originally had also intended to use some of the planets in 2001. It's all sort of this epic, slightly atonal, amorphous, atmospheric music that was written in the early mid part of the 20th century. That's very filmic. It's just very filled with strong visual imagery.
You have a number of different composers in that particular concert, including John Adams. Talk about his piece about the
John
Fast
Adams'
Machine.
Short Ride in a Fast Machine, written in the 1980s, when minimalism was just sort of coming into its own as a mainstream force. And this is only a 5-minute little shot of adrenaline, I call it. It's high-powered, it's fast. John Adams said of it, have you ever had the experience where someone invites you to ride in their wonderful new fast car and then you later regret it? That's how he heard this piece. It was written for the opening of Great Woods in Mansfield, Massachusetts, for the Pittsburgh Symphony. So it's written as a concert opener and is a good way to launch a season.
This has been in the news, and we're talking with Christopher Wilkins from the Boston Landmarks Orchestra. Another annual feature are the dance concerts.
Right.
You've got one lined up in August as well.
We have a great one. This is often the night when we are best able to showcase the diversity of Boston's culture. Lots of different ethnic groups. We had last year a Korean drumming dancing group. We've done Syrians and Armenians and Cuba and Puerto Rico and Ireland and so forth. This year we have a major project on Haitian music and dance. We have a collaboration with Camp Harborview. So dozens of children who are involved in that program out in Long Island and in the Boston Harbor, who will use music, dance, and then we also have some film and light projection that we're going to use in their piece. And we're working with Castle of Our Skins and Conservatory Lab Charter School, also in that Haitian project. We also have Yossi Kakashi, who's a Japanese-born flamenco dancer, fantastic professional dancer here in town, to do some of El Amor Brujo, the great flamenco-inspired work of Manuel de Falla.
In talking because de Falla, he was from that part of Spain in the south, but he also worked on the folklore with Garcia Lorca, I think, too, right?
He most certainly did, yeah. And Revueltas, who's a little bit younger Mexican composer, came from Mexico to Spain to work with them. He was inspired by them both, and very influenced by the thing about flamenco is called the cante hondo, and the interest was in the real rootedness of that music in the earth and in the tough, hard Scrabble existence. Very different from the refined view of orchestral music in the concert hall. And I think it was a refreshing and very real injection of that idea of folk music in the orchestral setting at that time.
We should mention that if people want to get some more details about what's coming, there's a way they can check that out.
Landmarksorchestra.org.
All right. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure.
Christopher Wilkins from the Boston Landmarks Orchestra. We'll have more news in just a moment.